So that concludes our introductions, and I will begin now with a passage from Overy Hendricks' essay, which is titled, A More Perfect High-Tech Lynching, Obama, the Press, and Jeremiah Wright. So here's the quote. All right, the money quote. All right. Like Sam Hose, and unlike Clarence Thomas, Jeremiah Wright is the victim of a lynching. The only major difference between Hose and Wright, other than particularities of historical setting and circumstance, is that the goal of Hose's lynching was physical death, while the goal of Wright's lynching was social death. And while the instruments of Hose's ordeal were knife and flame, Wright's demise was wrought by visual optics, keyboard, and pen. That was your quote?
Yeah, I wrote that.
I didn't make it up.
And I meant that. In the essay, one of my main concerns was that, well, first, Jeremiah Wright has been terribly maligned and misportrayed. And some of the things that our president, whom I support wholeheartedly, but some of the things that he was responding to in the speech were mischaracterizations of Jeremiah Wright. And so I wrote the article to sort of tell who Jeremiah Wright really is, what he really said, and to analyze it. And you know, I saw that and I showed, I believe, that everything Jeremiah said either was fully factual or had a basis in fact. And in fact, a very supportive and loving biographer of George Bush even made a similar claim. And I made an analogy with Sam Hose. You might remember the terribly, one of the most horrific lynchings in the history of this country was in 1889 in Georgia, Coweta County. And it was very, very prolonged, and the press for weeks built it up and said that he had done all kinds of terrible things that he never did, and he whipped everyone into a frenzy, and when they got their hands on him, they horribly tortured him for hours and hours and hours, and it's just a terrible thing. Well, Jeremiah, the same happened to Jeremiah. The press got hold of it, and they misportrayed it, they blew things out of perspective. This very brilliant, loving, erudite man was portrayed as some kind of monster and hater. And his life was destroyed. At one point, they had to have 2 police cars guarding his house. They'd hacked into his computers. They found out what flights he'd be on, and they'd make death threats. And there was an honorary doctorate, his 9th honorary doctorate that he was being offered, was rescinded, and his career just fell apart. And that's not a story that's really been told. It's one of the most shameful episodes in journalism in this country. And so that's the basic premise. And the president, I understand why the president did it. I mean, it's like the biblical thing. You have to make a choice. Are you going to sacrifice one to try to save the many? But he did sacrifice him, and he didn't misportray him. And I don't think he had a choice. It's to America's shame that he had to make a choice like that. But I'm honest about it. He misportrays Jeremiah, and if we just take Jeremiah's case, he does him a disservice. Again, I think that in order to give himself a chance to do a greater service for the country. It's tragic, but I want to put it in perspective. That's what I did.
Well, it's interesting because several of the reviews that have come out have been very good reviews, and several of them point right to Overy's essay, Professor Hendricks' essay, and I believe it's an interesting kind of reanalysis among those in the media about how Jeremiah Wright was portrayed, and so it's a very thorough essay, and so I definitely recommend that those who are skeptical take a read of it. Next is the quote from Derrick Johnson, and this is from part 1. The beginning, the build-up to Barack Obama having to give the speech. And the title of this essay is called Right Stuff, Wrong Time. Right as in W-R-I-G-H-T, stuff, wrong time. And so this is the quote from that essay. The candidate, who up to this point had walked a racial tightrope as no black man had ever walked one before, saw that he was about to be fatally shamed by his unashamedly black pastor. Successfully explaining the perspective of black anger while running a crossover campaign of hope would take nothing less than a miracle. Not a single word could be misspoken.
And he didn't. In the third, I mean, the amazing part about this race, of course, is, as I wrote in the third chapter, I can read my own writing better than I can do it by memory. He had the discipline of Malcolm X. He had to be serious without being angry. He had to relate without being a clown. He had to be the soul for the nation without being a singer or a preacher. He had to be cool without being cold. And above all, he could never lose his cool. Obama wore Jackie Robinson's and Hank Aaron's mask of calm. He had the focus of the Underground Railroad's Harriet Tubman, who boasted of her 19 journeys that freed over 300 slaves. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger. And so in lots of ways, when people ask me two things, as being in Grant Park the night that, on election night. And two things always come to mind first and foremost. One is half hour before the new First Family came out, people were asked to say the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'm 54. And I've never heard such a multicultural throng say the Pledge of Allegiance with a reverberation that came up right through the feet of the press podium. And then he comes out, and it just hit me that for his campaign to get that kind of response from so many people who have at one point or another, black, Hispanic, woman, gay, felt at some point betrayed by the flag, and to have this guy come out to represent the flag now, the only person that could do that is someone who literally channeled 400 years of struggle and pain and into becoming the single most disciplined, and I know a lot of us folks of color in this room have had to display all kinds of discipline in our jobs, accept lots of humiliations along the way. But he managed to channel it all to where he was not rocked by the Jeremiah Wright thing. He also wasn't rocked later in the campaign at the final hours when Sarah Palin said things like, he doesn't see America like you and I see it. And so, and by the way, that was at one of the Florida rallies where someone responded by saying, kill him. Was not completely confirmed who that kill him was meant for, but you take your own guesses. So he got to this point by literally being a perfect person. And what's fascinating now, and I guess we'll get this later in further discussion, is I think what we're seeing right now in the last several weeks with some of the tonalities of his opposition on his policies, that it's one thing to be opposed to his policies, but it's also it's almost like a new challenge. How perfect are you going to be? When are you going to blow up? Almost as if when Joe Wilson says, "You lie," waiting for Obama to snap. And again, with probably one of the most amazing things that really has kind of not really been dealt with, and I'll end here, is that Obama just kept right on going.
All right, so we've got Adam up next. And the title of his essay is The Audacity of Post-Racism. And here we have his Very provocative quote. Right. For my part, I watched the speech in my living room on a laptop computer with tinny speakers, and I was with Obama until he let white people off the hook.